risk of not behaving ethically can cost real money though, through loss of market share, lost profit, and increased regulation. Reactive approaches to ethics violations typically accepts the premise that these behaviors will happen again. A proactive approach may provide the framework for a universally moral and ethical culture that shares the same standards of behavior. The most successful managers are found to be the most ethical and work in the most ethical environments. Creating an ethical culture begins with top management, a written mission and vision statement, and an ethical code of conduct. Creating a corporate culture bound to written codes of ethic will require these basic investments. There are prevention costs attached to forming this culture. Prevention costs include hiring ethical employees, core competency training in ethical issues and to promote awareness, and having an active ethics department to monitor progress and address problems. Appraisal costs include auditing behaviors for compliance. Failure to adhere to ethical principles can result in increased staff turnover, fines, litigation, loss of market share, and philanthropic support. Growing an ethical institution means growing a solid root system that supports the entire process. These themes emerging from the literature review becomes a representation for our conceptual map. Utility, cost, resource allocation, bioethics, evidence-based medicine, procedural justice, culture, leadership, education, and decision-making. I propose this concept map should look more like an up-ended pyramid. The smallest point, that first critical decision, is often where the ripple effect moves outward. If we consciously try to behave with ethics by forming a solid root system, we will grow ethical students that become ethical leaders. We will have an ethical culture that understands procedural justice and can apply ethical decisions alongside of evidence-based medicine and best practices. Bioethical issues can be attacked with ethics and compassion. And as our resources continue to tighten, understanding resource allocation while controlling costs is mandatory. At the top of the upended pyramid is the broad term of utility. Utility includes non-monetary improvements that indirectly affect the bottom line. Error management, improved quality measures, greater job satisfaction, better patient care, and ultimately better patient outcomes result. The utility of each ethical decision in medicine not only affects patients, but staff, management, and our future. The transformation of healthcare is continuous and inevitable, and as our population ages, resources will become more limited as revenues dwindle. Creative approaches are necessary if we want to sustain top quality healthcare and maintain ethical principles. The highest quality healthcare is really the lowest cost. But most importantly, behaving ethically is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. We have a few minutes for questions.
I have a question that's kind of minutiae, but it's something I've been looking for, and I think y'all found it. You quoted a 23% functionally illiterate statistic, which I think is right, based on what I see.
Mm-hmm.
You cited work by Axtell and Thompson.
Yes.
Did they do a study and come up with the idea that 23% are functionally illiterate? Because if they did, I'd love to take a look at it.
Oh, it's in my references. And
I see it.
Oh, okay. As off the top of my head, I can't come up with that particular like the whole article.
I just don't know if they said it or studied it, but the thing is, like, high school, the primary and secondary schools will tell you that's not true. They'll say the number's 8 to 10%, the number of people who don't graduate. But you can feel it. I mean, you go in and you teach, and a few of us in the room are community college professors, and we see there that the number of people who you send home to read the book and you know didn't do it because they can't is pretty high.
Well, and I think in this context as well, it's expecting just a regular person to go in and understand what it means to have an MRI or to be diagnosed with an aneurysm or all the whole language of medicine, and how can you expect them to understand that? I mean, I can't stand, I'm just learning the business terms and all this other, a whole other realm of thought. I think that it's also illiterate, but it's also just a whole language of medicine is overwhelming, particularly when you're sick.
What I'm saying, if I go to the doctor, I get a disclosure. Like, it might be as simple as, if you develop these symptoms within 24 hours, go to this place, and I'm convinced that somewhere between a fifth and a tenth of my students couldn't look at that and decide what to do about it.
That's right. Yeah, and I don't remember if they actually did a study or if they were, looking at what the literature was saying about literacy. I don't recall either.
Okay.
We looked at a stack of stuff, but other studies that I have looked at that have to do with literacy is broken up into, I'm working with education graduate students as well, is broken up into so many different sectors, different areas. The term literate means so much, you know, or being illiterate means a lot. You know, once upon a time, illiterate meant that you couldn't read, you couldn't process, you couldn't do anything. We have technology literacy, we have medical terminology literacy, the comprehension. It's a much bigger concept than, and I think that's what you're running into.
I think the primary and secondary schools are defining as phonics. Like, can you mouth the words of the sentence? And can you
That's
say
right,
back
but
what
at
letter
the
it
college
is?
level, we run into literacy issues where they cannot, they can't transfer information. They can read it, they can memorize it, but they can't transfer it, or they cannot retain it, or comprehension. Right now, I'm working with some students at the undergraduate level, and the returning adult population, they've been out there in the workplace, and comprehension, and I'm wondering, I'm looking at this right now to try to figure out, are they just out of practice? You know, is this like flexing your muscles? Do you have to go like lift some weights to become literate? You know, again, in comprehension, so.
I find it very fascinating, and this is a rhetorical question, maybe we'll discuss it afterwards. Just that moral reasoning seems to digress or fade at a number of levels when salary increases. You found that, I didn't know you found that because I don't have Carolyn myself, but it's disturbing and kind of fascinating at the same time, and what happens in between.
And why it happens.
And why it happens.
We don't really try to figure out why it's happening. We're just trying to show that it is happening.
Yeah.
I work for the Cleveland Clinic, and it's a very well-known institution, and I can tell you, you know, with the moral reasoning, emotional intelligence, all these topics are coming up, but I'm also getting squeezed, you know, perform, turn things over, work with less, so it's conflicting. So if I'm successful with this, maybe I'll present to them. But I mean, seriously, that's what's happening. We have to be more efficient. Healthcare has never been a business model, and now we're trying to become a business model. That's why I'm here. I have to figure out what that meant. I have to know I've been doing this for 22 years, and now I have to figure out how to make this more cost-effective, but also while maintaining the principles.
And we're planning to survey per population with this assessment to see what we find.
That should be interesting.
Hopefully we'll be here next year.
Thank you,
Anything
Barbara.
else? Thank you.
Okay, the next presentation